All right, listen, let's get into our conversation. And first of all, perhaps it's good to get an idea of how this thing is looking across the country. We'll start in the Upper East region where our correspondent Albert Sori joins us on the phone. Albert, good morning.
Good morning, Kojo.
Yeah. Now, I know that not all areas have been affected equally. Give us an idea of the Upper East region, just how little or how much of the impact of this dry spell has been felt there.
Yes, so in the Upper East region, the situation is that most of the farmers are late in terms of the cultivation because the rainy season didn't start at the time that normally it would start. So, for instance, last year we had rains a bit early. By April last year, we already had some rains. But this year, the rains the first rain came very late in April, and then the whole of May, there was no rain at all. And then when June came, that was when we started getting some rains. So it means that generally the farmers in this region were late in terms of how early they started their cultivation. So they lost about a month or two in terms of the season. And then as the rains progressed, we had a situation where somewhere in August, when they needed the rains most, it stopped for about 2 weeks. And so that's the situation we have in the region. In other regions, they had longer dry spells, but in this region, this was the situation that we had.
So tell us about the impact of those lost 2 months or so. Uh, how has it affected their productivity and revenue?
Yes, so what it means is that most of them will either not get a lot of yield, especially if the rain stop before the end of October. There have been seasons where the rains would normally continue until late October. But last year, for instance, when September ended, we just had a few drizzles into October, and then the rain stopped completely and the dry season came in. And so if we have a similar situation this year, it means that either they are going to get very poor yields, or some will not even be able to harvest their crops, like granules, for instance, because if you're harvesting granules or potatoes or yam, you need the land to be moist for you to do it, because you have to uproot the crop to get the yield. And so that's the situation we are likely to have if the rains don't continue up to October. It means that most of us are going to, have a very poor yield, or they are not going to get anything at all from, the cultivation that they have done this year.
Thank you for that. Rafiq Salam is also on the line from the Upper West region. Rafiq, good morning. Understanding is that the impact has been a little bit more severe in your region. Tell us about that.
Speaking to farmers, they are really deeply worried and concerned about the situation, because the dry spell that was experienced in this Upper West region was really devastating for them. As Albert rightly put it, some of them want to farm as early as March, April, and then expected to have good rains. And so when they did the planting, they expected that once the rain comes, at least it will gel with whatever they have planted. But for a dry spell of close to about 5-6 weeks, really didn't help matters. And so when you move to the communities like the Sesala Enclave, which is the breadbasket of the region, they are the people that are mostly affected by these this dry spell that we're experiencing. So farmers really, though the season is still not over, but already they are counting their losses. Some of them have told me that they have at least invested huge sums of money, thousands of Ghana cedis into producing this large acreage of farms, and yet it's amounting to nothing. And so the people really are not happy with the way things are panning out, especially in the Central Enclave. Just a week ago when I moved to the East district and then also heading to the Central West, the farm that I saw, that I was really not happy with what I saw. The maize, that destruction, and then if you see the maize, they were not even watering, and then you saw farmers right at the farms, and they just can't say anything that's certain akimbo.
What is their main concern here? Is it the loss of the produce? Are they worried about not being able to feed their families, or the revenue? Tell me what their biggest concern is at this point.
Whatever that you have read, Kojo, is based on that. How are they going to feed their families? Here in that also, the majority of the farmers, more than 50% of them are subsistence farmers. And so they depend on these food crops to feed their families. It's just some few, tons that few people who are involved in this commercial farming that at least sells the problem. And even with those who are doing subsistence farming, after taking what their family will eat, they need to tell some of those things at least to, as a batter, at least to get other ingredients into their food. And so that's their main worry. The second thing has to do with loans that these commercial farmers have gone into, to take care of these large acreage. Let me start an example. A hectare of land, if you are going to plow it, the least cost involved in it is about 4,000 Ghana cedis. 4,000 Ghana cedis. And so if you have gotten this money into these farms, and then at the end of the day, it's amounting to nothing. It wouldn't really go well for the situation. So some farmers here in the Upper West, some of them are on near suicide mission because they don't really believe in what will happen to them, because they expected a lot. They had a lot of hopes that at the end of the season they will be able to get much. But at the end of the day, it's like much ado about nothing.
We'll get to the farmers who are on near suicide mission, but you, I know you're also a farmer. Did you plant this season, and have you been affected?
I don't really know what really got into me. I suspected that it may not be well this year, and so because of that, I applied my brakes. And so this year, I didn't go into real commercial farming. What I did was to do commercial plowing for farmers, and then to take the money. I have about 10 tractors, new tractors, and that's what I use. Plowing an acre is about 300 Ghana cedis. And so because of that, that's where I went into. So I was only expecting that when these farms, have good yields, and then when they are harvest, then I'll go in with my crashes also to take another booty. But here's the case. The first plan has worked. The second plan wouldn't work for me because I don't expect much harvest from the farmers that will allow me to take my crashes to go and take. When you do the crashing, each 10 bags that you crash, you take 1 bag. And so that was what I was expecting after doing the commercial plowing for them. But it appears that will be in vain.
You've also, you talked about something, and I want to understand this. How, in the Upper West region, because in the past we had concerns about price of fertilizer, were there some farmers who couldn't cultivate much because of the price of fertilizer? And how are they reacting to this dry spell?
When government got this issue of the fertilizer subsidy, somewhere around 2018, 2019, the subsidized fertilizer used to cost about 47, 49 Ghana cedis. And many people, that really, got a lot of people into farming, people like me. The first time that I got into farming, I plowed about 420 acres. And I got over 4,000 bags of maize. The second incident, the second year, I think that was around 2019, 2020, the subsidized fertilizer was around 62, 65 cities. I went and I did over 600 acres, and I got over 5,000 bags of maize. But the third one, when the program folded up, as we speak now, a bag of fertilizer in the region costs about between 400 and about 600 Ghana cedis. Many farmers could not afford it, and because of that, they reduced the farm size. And so you've got lots of farmers, because there is no subsidy on the fertilizer, and so because of they have reduced their farm size, and which is really at least having impact on the farmers. And so they want to cut their coat according to their size, and that's really what actually transferred it. Because the cost of fertilizer here is really having a lot of effect on farmers, and because of that, they reduce the size of their farms.
So how are the farmers in your region reacting to government's proposals of how to deal with this? The ban on the export of grain and the compensation of about 1,000 cedis per acre.
Their reaction is really mixed. Because I spoke to some of them, yes. Some of them are telling me that it's better to have nothing. And then others are saying that they are even poo-pooing it, because they are saying that it's much ado about nothing. They think that's a lip service. Because if you take, like, say, you're talking about a hectare, and government want to give them relief, that will cost about 1,000 Ghana cedis. I told you earlier, the cost of, farming 1 hectare, which is about 2 acres, is close to about, the least is 4,000 Ghana cedis. And so if the cost, because if you take fertilizer, we are going to do 2 fertilizer, that's about 1,000 Ghana cedis. The cost of plowing, that's about 600 Ghana cedis. That alone is about 1,006. But don't talk about having laborers on the farm. They're planting the seed. So 1,000 Ghana cedis for them, they don't think that they can do anything. But at least, like some of them say, it's far better than saying that, okay, may God send you there. That's what the local will tell you. It's far better to have it than not having it. But for them, they think that it won't do anything.
Well, thank you very much, Rafiq, for that update. Thank you to Albert Sorry as well. That's Upper West and Upper East correspondents, respectively, giving us the update on the effects of the dry spell on farming in these parts of the country. All right, let's talk to Bismarck Norte, Executive Director of the Peasant Farmers Association of Ghana. Mr. Norte, thank you for your time. Okay.
Hello, thank you. Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Great. Now, maybe we can start with the big picture. Exactly about how many of your farmers have been affected by this dry spell?
Well, I think that when it comes to the number of farmers that have been affected, at least the official figures from the ministry amounts to over 900,000 farmers who are, and over 400,000 farmers who have been directly affected. We even believe that this figure could be more because if you look at the figures from the ministry, the concentration of farmers were mostly from the middle belt and then the northern belt, that's the savannah areas. But we have farmers around the Volta region, Hohoi and its environs, around the Oti area. Even some farmers in the eastern region also suffered some losses. So we estimate that the number should be a bit higher than what the ministry put out there.
Right. Wow. But your estimation so far, about, 700,000 to 800,000 farmers?
Yeah, that should be more. That should be more because if, as I mentioned, for those who are directly affected, the ministry says 400,000. We believe that should be in the region of around 500 to 700,000 farmers. Those should be the ones those are directly affected by this catastrophe.
Okay, thank you, Bismarck. Now, just before we get into how these, 500 to 600,000 farmers are reacting to government's initiatives, let's also say good morning to Edward Karawe. He's the former General Secretary of the General Agriculture Workers Union. Mr. Karawe, thank you for your time. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, sir.
Mr. Karawe, you'll have to switch off your radio so that you can just listen to us on the phone. We're getting some very heavy feedback.
Do you still have the feedback?
No, it's perfect now. It's very good now. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So, Mr. Karawe, you've heard what government intends to do about this. They say it's an act of God couldn't be avoided. It's happened, so we need to make the most of it. So listen, let's ban the export of grains. Keep as much of what we do have here to mitigate the shortages. And then let's see if we can compensate some farmers with about 1,000 cedis per hectare. Tell me your assessment of government's response.
Well, I see government response in two areas. First, the issue must be looked in two areas. First, whether or not this could have been mitigated. So, if what we ought to have done, and we have not done, or if we have done something, probably this act of God will look not devastating as it is. Then the other thing is failure to do that. The act of God is here with us. We have suffered heavily on it, and then we want to take some measures. How effective are those measures? So if you look at what we have failed to do, is that droughts are not something we shouldn't expect in this country. We have signs of the droughts coming, and it is what we describe as drought that it becomes drought. If it is 1 week lack of rain for some particular crops and you don't have irrigation for them, then those crops will be affected. That is drought for that particular crop. So if we don't want to have those crops affected, then what we ought to do is to have water available so that when the rains do not come for 1 week, we water those crops. So the point is that we have set to ourselves to build irrigation dams. Not today, not within this government, but even previously. In the 1970s, most of the dams have been built by the Champon regime, and which we have been using. So what we do is just to rehabilitate them. If we had built the Pologo irrigation dam, look, this effect on the natural causes would have been mitigated very much. You see, we haven't done that. We also did one village, one dam, with the purpose of what? Providing water for irrigation. There are different uses of dams, but these particular dams, we said they were to be used for what? Agricultural purposes, irrigation purpose. We said we built 574 dams. We are excited to say we are building. Where are the dams? Are they fit for purpose? That is what we should be looking at. And there is no evidence on the ground to show that the 574 dams built under the One Village, One Dam project have played a role to mitigate the drought. Not a single dam that have they come out to tell us that when the drought came, they used that dam to mitigate the drought on their farms. Government has not been able to tell us that. The only thing they are telling us is that they have built. So we should take it as given. Yes, if we take it as given, what is the effect of it? So that is the part. So we are now here. We have the full impact of it, of the drought. Government comes in to say, look, I'm coming out with some measure. The total cost, they are saying, is $500 million. And that strikes some of us very much. In the sense that within these few months, government is able to mobilize $500 million, yet we needed $993 million to build the irrigation dam, the Pologo irrigation dam, for 3.5 years, and government could not mobilize money to build the dam. But what it is now today, they are mobilizing $500 million. We think that our government is not looking for solutions. Now, with this money, with some of their measures, they are going to give some of the farmers some cash for losing their farms. That certainly is grossly inadequate. Beyond that, they said they will also give inputs. Yes, you give them inputs. Even if you give the farmers inputs today, some of the farms don't even exist anymore. Those that still exist, if you even apply the inputs on them, you would only waste the inputs. You are not going to. It is not going to affect the fortunes of those farms. Now, we are also saying we are banning the exportation of grain within the country. That is good. Because if government is seeking to solicit funds from our development partners and to import grain into the country, because we have less food for within the country, then it is reasonable to say that we make sure that the little that we have in the country does not get out of the country. So you ban. Now we also hear them say that, look, we are going to deploy the security, the military, to go and police our borders. You know, this phrase that our borders are porous is always with us. It's not only a phrase, but it also manifests itself fiscally. When it came to the Planting for Food and Jobs Phase 1, we were all witnesses to the smuggling of inputs, fertilizer across our borders. That is a testimony of the fact that our borders are porous. What is a porous border? A border that you can easily walk across and do whatever you want to do and come back. It's porous. It matters not whether security are there or security are not there, whether it's a designated entry and exit point or not. The fact that you can do what you want without being accosted is porous. So it's not only about the borderline where there are no security, but even where there is security, it's also still porous. Yeah. So that is the import of it. So we suffered that. Now, recently, there's so much smuggling of cocoa. And cocoa smuggling, where it has rate, is one of the factors threatening our security. Do they mean to say that cocoa smuggling was not something so critical to Ghana when cocoa is the mainstay of this country? So why do they wait? How can they convince us today that we do not have enough security to deal with smuggling that was going on things that are so dear to us? Yet today, we now suddenly have security to go and police entire borders. And you see, you can just do simple mathematics. You don't need to be so much a geographer. But just look at it. We are in Accra here. So from Aflao, it will go all the way to the north, all the way to Wa areas. Then from there to Agric, whatever, back to the sea. That is all our borders. They have the security to cover all that now today. And then even our sea is also another border because people still smuggle through the sea too. So it doesn't give us confidence that they will be able to do what they want to do.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, Bismarck Norte is with us still. He's Executive Director of the Peasant Farmers Association of Ghana. Mr. Norte, your members are being criticized for, grumbling about having to take a bit of a haircut, if you will, in terms of having to sell their produce within the borders at a cheaper price than they could have exported it for. The suggestion is that, look, it's only in times of crisis that you are required to sacrifice for your nation. Why is this a problem for your members?
Well, thank you very much. I think that the decision to ban the exportation of these grains, this is not the first time that the country or the government is taking that position. If you recall, in the year 2022, government took a similar position, and the outcomes of that particular decision had a very negative effect on farmers. What happened is that normally when you have this imposition of restriction, what you do is that you create a system where the farmers are not able to have access to available and well-known markets to sell and get their goods at competitive prices. Because what you do is that, normally when the farmers plant and they are harvesting, and they want to sell their produce, they factor in a lot of their production costs. So they need to sell their produce at prices that are competitive, that can recover their investment that they made. When you open up the system, like what we used to experience, you see that there are buyers from within Ghana, outside the country, who buy this produce at those prices. Now, when you issue a restriction, what you are doing is that you've limited the scope of farmers to get buyers for their produce. Then it means that the farmers are now compelled to rely on the few buyers who are available. And the challenge is that because the buyers now know that the farmers have limited options, they tend to now become the price determinators for the farmers. So now they determine the price that they feel the farmers should sell their produce. And because the farmers are desperate and they know they have no options elsewhere, they are forced to sell at those low prices. And that is the experience that the farmers had in 2022 and even last year. So the point we are making is that if your ministry is embarking on such an emergency move, the best thing to do is to see how you can put in place measures to insulate the farmers from experiencing those previous bad experiences. And I heard the minister say that if you are a farmer and you have your produce that you want to sell, you could go to the Agric directors or the MOFA agencies to do that. That is fine. But at what price are they going to offer those produce and buy from the farmers? That's a critical question. Because if you open up yourself that you are willing to buy, but you don't give us a fair price, and farmers come and you offer them prices that are not competitive, then you are shorting the farmers. Another scenario that we foresee, because that happened in the past, is that when the ban was imposed, because farmers were frustrated, the buyers and some aggregators took advantage, bought the produce at very low prices, and then stored them, and were hoping in anticipation that the bans would be lifted. When the bans were lifted, they now had the goods, and now they had to export them at high prices at the expense of the farmer. So you realize that this measure that the ministry is taking, without taking on board these concerns of farmers, will be counterproductive. Because on one breath, you are trying to protect all of us, but on another breath, you are making the farmer much more poorer. And this will also affect the farmer going for the next planting season. Because the thinking is that in the next season, what is the expectation? That when I finish planting, we will not have a repeat of this scenario and government will be compelled to place a ban, and I will not get good prices for my product. So these are the issues that we are raising. And you see, when you also look at the regime that we operate even within the continent, you see, in Ghana here, a lot of the food crops that we consume, or we consume, the cowpea, the tomatoes, the onions, a lot of them, we are importing them from neighboring countries. You understand? So, for instance, if we issue this ban and we are restricting the neighboring countries that don't come to Ghana and purchase maize or rice or sorghum or even soya, and then Niger also says, let me retaliate, no Ghanaians should come and purchase onion. What do you think is going to happen to the price of onions in Ghana and tomatoes? So we, in as much as we understand that it is an emergency situation, we hope that the government will put in place measures to insulate the farmers. Because as you rightly mentioned, you don't find a way of giving haircuts to farmers, let the farmers suffer as a result of the lack of planning, lack of proactiveness on your part. And we say this because from decades, we have been calling for ways to deal with issues of climate change. We have been calling for ways to ensure that we irrigate our country as much as possible. We've been calling for enough investment to ensure that at every point in time, Ghana is not a rain-fed country. But what we see are lip services, what we see are train of money by politicians to useless ventures. Case in point is the one village, one dam. If a country can spend 250,000 cedis on one dam and construct in total of 574 dams, the total is over 175 million Ghana cedis that was spent on 1V1B. So how do you spend such amount of money and then within just 2 months of rainfall, you're in a disaster? It doesn't make sense. How do you spend as a country? You spend millions of cedis, over 400 million cedis on PFJ from 2017 to 2022. And then just 2 months of rainfall, we're in crisis. How do you as a country account for all the expenditure that goes to the ministry from decades till now? And then just 2 months of rainfall, we are in this situation. So it tells you that the situation is not only about blaming nature, but it's also about the lack of proactiveness, the lack of foresight by our leaders.
Right.
And what even hurts me most, Winston, is that we have an agency in Ghana. That's the Ghana Meteo Agency. And this agency, they provide forecasts. They provide seasonal forecasts. They provide monthly forecasts. They provide weekly forecasts. They provide daily forecasts. So before every planting season, these people produce the forecast that in this particular season, you should be expecting some dry spells or be expecting much rain. And this information was out there even before the planting season. And the ministry had information that there was going to be dry spell. The question is that what did they do in anticipation of that? They sat down and hoped that the situation would not go according to what was forecasted. And now we are here, and the measures that you are taking in place are measures that will rather hurt the farmers other than promote them. I think that we want to have some level of better planning and management to ensure that we don't get here again. And you see, when it comes to the intervention of providing inputs, you see, we are providing the inputs for the farmers under the same conditions. So if you provide the seed and the fertilizers, and the expectation is that the farmers are told to expect rains in September, October, and based on that, they should get the seeds. So what if they get the seeds, they go and plow and they plant and doesn't rain? What happens again? You see. So I think that the approach by the ministry, in as much as we understand what they want to do, but we feel that if they had done broad consultation, they would have gotten some of the nuances that we are talking about and then find a better way of doing the situation. And we hope that this situation is a learning ground for all of us, that we don't hope that next year we come back to this same scenario again. How are we ensuring that we are irrigating the country? Listen, just last week, I was in the Western region. There was a farming community around Shama. They rely on irrigation. We went to see the dam. The whole water in the dam has been polluted because of galamsey. So if you go to that particular place, the farmers there who are planting rice cannot use that water to irrigate their farms. And that's the situation that's happening across the country. And we are all sitting aloof, watching things to go haywire. And then when the situation comes, then we allow the politicians to now go and look for money to try to reverse the situation. And we know that anytime they talk about looking for money and procurement, we know what that means. How they are capped and how they get their share. And we also know that in an election year, we know what they will try to do. So it's a very messy situation, Winston. It's a very messy situation, and I think it's really a very tough time to be a Ghanaian, if you ask me.
Thank you, Bismarck. Let's look at the way forward, Mr. Kariwe. Look, with how government has handled this, not only their response, but even the lead up to this and how they missed opportunities to reduce the impact of bad weather on agriculture. Mr. Kariwe, how do we fix this? At this point, what would be your recommendations to government to better manage the situation?
Well, when there are crises, we just need to come together and manage it. So we just can call on government to make sure that they really implement what they want to do efficiently and effectively. But then that is not the end of it. It's only to contain the crisis. But we're already on our way to realizing low output at the end of this year because of what we had put in place or what we had not put in place. So this one has only come to aggravate it, to exacerbate the situation. So even if we address the situation now, we should know that the fundamental things that we need to do to make sure that agriculture is functional, we do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kariwe. Mr. Norte, let's give you the final word on this one. As a representative of the peasant farmers, what would be your recommendation of how this should be managed?
Hello?
Yes, Mr. Norte, did you hear the question?
Can you please repeat yourself?
It's very hard to hear you. The line is not great. I'm asking, what would be your recommendations of the way forward?
Yeah, so what you are saying is that for the major problem that we have is the ban on the exportation, and want to show that the minimum way to guarantee that farmers are not shortchanged within this period is that we want the ministry to put in measures to announce at least a minimum guaranteed price for each of the commodities. So if you are talking about maize, we should be clear as to what is the minimum price to sell maize. It's about rice, what's the minimum price? It's about soya, what's the minimum price? Aside that, the ministry should let us know what mechanisms they have in place to ensure that the buyers are able to buy the produce from the farmers. Are they contracting or are they using buffer stock to do that? Let's also have a clear plan so that farmers are not shortchanged. Then on the support for the farmers, the input support and then the cash support, I think that we will need to have a very transparent system to ensure that the system or the approach is not compromised. Anytime politicians are involved in things like that, we know how it ends up. So we hope that the ministry uses the right approach, the right system, and the right mechanism. I heard that the minister was saying that to identify the vulnerable farmers, we are going to use the platform that they use under the PFGA 2.0. That's the Ghana Agricultural and Agribusiness Platform. Currently, that platform has a lot of challenges. If you go to a lot of areas, they have about 2 or 3 extension officers who are supposed to register over 40,000 farmers, and they are not able to do that. They have gathered that the gadgets are not even working. So if you are going to rely on this same system, which is a bit flawed, then it means that you will not be able to capture all the vulnerable farmers. And again, the issue about providing the cash grant, we feel that the amount is inadequate, because if you are going to give a farmer 1,000 cedis per hectare, that is approximately 400 cedis per acre. And this is a farmer that even when you are producing maize, the minimum you are spending on an acre is about 3,000 Ghana cedis. So if you are just providing 400 Ghana cedis, what is the how will the farmer recover the shortfall of almost 2,000 to 3,000 Ghana cedis? So we hope that government should find a way and appease the farmers adequately instead of handing out this handout to them, because the handout will not solve the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Manote. Thank you, Mr. Kariwe. We appreciate your inputs.